After watching this video, you'll be able to make every savoury scone recipe in the world. The only limit is your imagination. And by the way, that's not clotted cream and jam on there. Let's start by preparing the base recipe, which will be our canvas, if you will, 600 grams of all-purpose plain flour in a food processor. You can also do this by hand, and we will get to that in a moment. Add seasoning with 1.5 teaspoons of salt, around 1/3 of a teaspoon of pepper and some dried herbs, a teaspoon each of dried oregano and thyme for me, 20 grams of sieved baking powder, and then blend the dry ingredients up or whisk together if you're doing this by hand before adding 150 grams of cold cubed butter. Now I will be blending this into the dry ingredients with my food processor, but if you don't have a machine, simply rub the butter into the dry ingredients with your fingers until the mixture has the consistency of fine breadcrumbs. And I'm just going to go in and make sure I have no big lumps of butter in this blitzed mix. And I'm happy with that consistency. So that's the base recipe done. I'm making Greek-style scones today. So I'm first going in with 75 grams of finely chopped olives, but this is where we can get creative. As well as adding cheese, you can use almost anything you like to pimp up your scones, with around 50 to 75 grams worth of each extra addition. For example, I combined 50 grams of jalapenos and 75 grams of cured and then cooked chorizo, as well as cheddar cheese in these hotshot scones, or add 75 grams of sun-dried tomatoes for these cheddar and sun-dried tomato scones. The possibilities are endless, and I do have more recipe suggestions in the description below if you're looking for savoury scone ideas. For these Greek scones, I'm using 150 grams of feta cheese. It's quite delicate, so needs to be carefully crumbled in, but obviously cheddar is the most common cheese to use, and the cheese and all other additions need to be stirred into the dry ingredients before adding milk, 300 millilitres of whole milk, into which, for more flavour, you can whisk a heaped teaspoon of mustard if you like. There are no eggs in my savoury scone recipe. I think the addition of eggs is more suited to sweet scones rather than savoury, so I leave them out. One final optional ingredient before I mix all this up, 2 tablespoons or around 25 grams of finely grated parmesan cheese, and then we can bring the whole thing together. First off with a large metal spoon. We don't want to work the dough too much, but eventually we will have to go in with our hands and bring the whole thing together, again very gently. You don't want to develop the gluten in the dough, so imagine you're massaging a butterfly or trying to gather up a will-o'-the-wisp. Do you remember will-o'-the-wisp? As a childhood flashback. I have them all the time while I'm making these recipe videos. Proustian memory, they call it, when it's related to the tastes and smells of food. Anywho, let's roll this dough out now with a very light hand, and you can see the marbling effect of the olives and the cheese, and that's a very apposite description when making Greek-style scones, seeing as though we Brits unscrupulously acquired the Greek Elgin marbles and refused to give them back. You need to keep tidying the edges of the dough as you go and create a symmetrical shape for reasons that will become apparent. And you want to roll the dough to about 1 to 1.5 centimetres thick, as you can see here. And then we're going to fold the dough over in half like this. And this may be easier for you if you've rolled out the dough on a sheet of baking paper, because then you can just gather the whole thing up and then whip it over. And the symmetrical shape we prepared earlier has afforded us a pretty neat piece of folded dough, but keep a nice tidy shop at this stage as well, before gently rolling and shaping and rolling and shaping, paying particular attention to the folded edge of the dough to make sure it's the same thickness as the rest, and level it to a thickness of around 2 to 2.5 centimetres, like this here. And then it's cutting time. Now you can cut these scones any size and shape, but do flour your cutter first so it doesn't stick in the dough. And when you go in with your cutter and also when you pull it out, don't twist it, because if you do that, the scone might not rise straight. And let's have a little close-up of a small bite-sized scone dough piece studded with the olives and the feta cheese. You'll have a lot of excess dough once you've cut these out, so just kind of gather it up gently and repeat the gentle rolling process, remembering to keep the edges tidy and a nice symmetrical shape. Fold the dough over, and I'm going to cut larger scones as well as the small ones, but before I do that, I'm going to bring in an already cut scone to compare the thickness so we don't have scones with all kinds of different heights, looking like a bunch of mutants in the oven, or what I like to call Hartlepool scones. And one more reminder not to twist the cutter as you cut the scones, straight down and straight up for the best results. And even though I've made 2 different sizes here, I will bake them on the same tray, making sure, of course, that there is enough distance between them to allow the air to circulate properly. And before they go in the oven, I'm going to give them an egg wash, a beaten egg with a splash of milk. And when you brush the scones, try not to get too much egg dribbling down the sides. It's almost unavoidable, but we want to keep the sides dry to allow the scones to puff upwards rather than outwards. But don't worry too much if a little egg wash drips off, because life is full of little imperfections, isn't it? And once brushed with the egg, we need to let the scones sit for around 20 minutes before going in the oven, which we can now turn on to a temperature of 200 Celsius, 390 Fahrenheit, with the fan on, and that 20-minute period will also give you time to add some toppings if you like. I've added more finely grated parmesan, freshly cracked black pepper and some paprika powder, but again, as with the fillings, you can put anything you can think of on top of these to complement your flavour profile. Before baking for between 16 and 25 minutes, depending on the size. My bite-sized scones, 5 centimetres in diameter, took 16 to 18 minutes, with the larger ones around 7 centimetres in diameter, taking around 22 minutes. We're looking for a deep golden colour on the top and on the bottom, and they should just crack open because of that folded dough to reveal a lovely soft flaky interior. We're not done with the taste sensations yet. You could just serve these with butter, but I'm going to go on first with some of my tzatziki, link in the description, because these are Greek scones, and then some of my 2-minute chili sauce, link in the description. And I have to say that was absolutely sensational. That's all the savoury scones you'll ever need in one video, and I'll see you next time, eh? Ta-ra.